Buck Sexton here in for Glenn Beck today on the Glenn Beck Radio program. Thank you very much for joining. Great to have you. 888-727-BECK is the phone number. You can call at any time. We can certainly have a chat here. So you would think at this point, perhaps the media would at least take a break from its constant effort to come up with some way, some means of destroying the Trump presidency in its infancy, in fact, destroying it before it has ever come to be. Maybe they would focus on Obama's legacy for his last few months in office. Maybe they would decide, for whatever reason, that they had other things to do than just try to constantly fearmonger and come up with different reasons that Donald Trump is going to destroy the country. It's not an exaggeration. I wish I could say it was. It's not actually something that is beyond the pale for a lot of the writers out there, a lot of the journalists. They really seem to think that we are on the precipice of the annihilation of the United States of America, something along those lines. And one of the ways that they're trying to get that point across is to suggest pretty openly that there is some major rise in what you would have to, what they term white nationalism, white supremacism, all these different terrible ideologies are supposedly on the rise now because of Donald Trump. So much so that the New York Times gave, what was this, just a day or two ago, they were writing a piece about the alt-right exulting in Donald Trump's election with a salute, Heil, H-E-I-L, as in the German, victory. So I suppose we're supposed to take from this that the Trump presidency is somehow what? Tied to neo-Nazism? Tied to white supremacy and white nationalists? That's the connection that they seem to want to make. And you'd have to ask yourself, is this the only instance in which a tiny fringe group that has no political power in this country, that is widely and rightly and completely reviled, that is a few hundred people? We'll get into the numbers in a moment. There was actually a fantastic piece that was making the rounds last week from somebody who hates Trump saying, I've got an idea. Stop pretending that Trump is a Nazi. Stop pretending he's Hitler. Stop saying that white supremacy is the only reason that anyone voted for Trump. You are, as the title of the piece stated, crying wolf again. This is what they are doing. This is what the left-wing media is doing, the New York Times, all the rest of them. They are crying wolf. They're finding some means to tie a hateful but obscure and unimportant group to a Trump presidency. And the connective tissue between these two things is flimsy, and so it's a lot of insinuation. It's a lot of, well, we heard that some of the group's members are very happy about the Trump victory. You could find all sorts of wackos out there who have politics of one sort or another. If you go back and look at some of the biggest mass shooters in U.S. history, some of them had long political manifestos that supported maybe one party or another or one candidate or another at some point in time. Does that destroy the legitimacy of that political party? Are we to be held responsible, we being anybody, for whomever votes within the party that we affiliate or that we are affiliated with, given that we're talking about tens of millions of people? There's going to be some crazies in there. There's going to be some bad people. But it's not about accuracy for the left with this anti-Trump mania. And it really is a mania. It's gone beyond anything that is rational. I keep telling my Democrat friends, I'm trying to explain to them on a regular basis, you got a better candidate for your interests with the Trump victory than many of the other options that were out there on the right. Trump is going to make deals with you. I think it was even this past weekend, there was an SNL sketch where Trump said the wall, forget it, this Obamacare, leave it. I don't think he's going to do that because the people who voted for him would turn on him and be very unhappy. But on a lot of other issues, Gay marriage, for example, one of the ones that gets a lot of attention for those who are hyperbolic in their hatred for Trump. No indication that he would touch that. In fact, there's plenty of indication that he is supportive of gay marriage. And when you had that bathroom bill fight over transgender rights, Trump said that people can use whatever bathroom they want, if you will recall. Didn't get a lot of attention on the campaign trail from the media because that wasn't really part of the anti-Trump script. Well, what do you mean he's open to letting transgender individuals who are transgender use whatever bathroom they want? That's not the Trump we're trying to create out there in the media. We're trying to create some kind of monster, Attila the Hun with a swooping side part. We're trying to make people scared. But Trump is not Hitler. Not by a mile, not even close. And to say so is irresponsible and it's wrong. To insinuate that that's the situation is wrong and irresponsible. And it just damages all of us. It hurts the prospects of reaching some sort of accommodation in the middle, finding issues upon which left and right can at least agree somewhat. They are out there. They do exist. How much coverage have you seen, for example, of Donald Trump wanting to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure? Obama's been talking about spending money on infrastructure for quite a while. We're $20 trillion in debt. I'm sure a lot of you who are limited government and not particularly enthusiastic about the idea of running up Uncle Sam's credit card even further into the red, but maybe Trump will do a good job. Maybe there's a case to be made for some infrastructure spending. At least it's a conversation we could have. You'll hear none of that. No, instead, the New York Times and other outlets, the Washington Post, they want to cover a neo-Nazi rally in Washington, D.C., the alt-right and neo-Nazis and whatever the connections are between those two. Alt-right, a term that I just heard for the first time, and I'm on the right, certainly not on the alt-right, maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, something like that. So this seems to be a relatively new phenomenon of mostly internet trolls who, of course, have a magnified presence on the web because the whole point of being a troll is that you say the sorts of things, you act in a way with your digital presence, whatever it may be, that you get maximum attention, that you annoy people. So you have a band of digital trolls. You have a few hundred white supremacists. You go and look on the Southern Poverty Law Center's website, for example, and you'll see what the estimates are for how many actual white supremacists there are in the country. You can take a look at the numbers. Actually, back to that piece on Slate Star Codex, I have the author's name here. I will get to it. It's Scott Alexander. Hates Trump. Thinks he's terrible, thinks he's a liar, thinks he's a buffoon. Also hates it when people say that he is a Nazi or that he's supported by Nazis and that means that therefore he's a part of National Socialism in America or any of that, not just intellectually lazy, but dangerous stuff that's out there. This is dangerous to say. Some of us were warning for quite a while, for example, that Black Lives Matter wasn't just a movement meant to reform police activity and to improve police-community relations in predominantly minority areas of the country, because the rhetoric that they were using, stop killing us, stop murdering us, rhetoric that I heard myself at rallies, signs that I read, photos that I was able to take at those rallies, that made it seem as though the overwhelming idea behind this wasn't reform, it wasn't bringing people together, it wasn't stopping police brutality. It was that there is a plague of racist, murdering cops who hunt young black men in this country. That sort of rhetoric leads to violence because some people will believe it and act upon it, and that has happened in the past. It may have happened within the last few days as well. So rhetoric matters. Saying that Donald Trump is in some way a closet neo-Nazi or a member of the alt-right or any of this, that major newspapers are spending much of their time trying to create these affiliations, trying to make it seem like that's happening, just shows you how desperate they are to destroy this administration from the get-go. No leeway, no honeymoon, no effort at all to even allow the possibility of national unity on any issue. Destroy. They are in seek and destroy mode with Donald Trump. They want to do nothing else other than that. The media wants to make sure that his campaign, or rather that his candidacy, comes to naught. You see this coverage that's happened of the meeting in D.C., and part of me feels bad talking about it, although it's already out there in all the major newspapers, right? We shouldn't give this more attention in a sense, and I understand this, the push-pull, the back and forth between whether you want to debunk the breathless exaggerations and lies of the leftist media, or you want to just move on to other issues. I promise you today we'll also talk about some of the Trump promises for the future, some of the things that he says will happen in the first 100 days of his candidacy, the very interesting and worthwhile back and forth between those in the Trump camp and the Republican Party about whether TPP, for example, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a good idea. These are things that affect all of us. These are issues that affect the economy. These are issues that may have an impact directly on your job, whether we're talking about taxes or trade agreements, perhaps even infrastructure spending, any number of things. But those are areas where they have to engage with the ideas of not just Donald Trump, but now the Republican Party, which is in quite a powerful position. They'd rather not do that. They'd rather write articles talking about how Donald Trump has expanded the Overton window, named for a guy called Overton, last name Overton, who figured that there was sort of acceptable political discourse and there were some things considered extreme and some things that were considered within that window, and that some politicians and some figures can come along and either contract or expand the window of what is allowable to discuss in public and what is not. Donald Trump has expanded the Overton window here, but he's done it in such a way that there's more speech, not less. He's done it in such a way that now we can actually have a worthwhile back and forth over whether this country has become so politically correct that it stifles even the most important issues of public policy and debate. Never mind trying to be sort of polite around your relatives over the Thanksgiving holiday or something. We're talking about a political correctness where all of a sudden half the country isn't allowed to feel the way it feels because the other half is going to shout them down, call them racist. Part of what upsets the left so much here and why you see the doubling down of a racism at all costs and racism accusations at all costs, and that as the primary strategy to undermine the Trump administration, is because the institutional left media has such an investment in that, has created such an infrastructure for using accusations really of racism. There are others out there too, misogyny, xenophobia, Islamophobia. Those really don't destroy people. Racism destroys people. Racism as an accusation ends careers, gets people fired, makes their friends and neighbors not want to be seen with them or talk to them. It's become an incredibly powerful tool. Donald Trump withstood all of that. The media doesn't want to let it go. The New York Times, the Washington Post, all the rest of them, they don't want to let it go. They have to finish Trump's presidency with he is a racist. If that doesn't happen, if they haven't convinced enough people in this country that either he is racist or you are racist for supporting him, by the way, they feel like they will have failed. It's immature. It's a mania. It's deeply destructive to everything that's happening in this country, to all the discussions we should have. But there are reasons why, once again, they are crying wolf. This has been the most effective strategy they have in the past. They don't want to have to engage with ideas. They'd rather just throw names out there and give a huge platform and a lot of attention to a couple of hundred imbeciles getting together, pretending that somehow they know something about history and Hitler, and a bunch of buffoons, a bunch of morons. Nobody cares except the New York Times and the Washington Post, because they can highlight these imbeciles and say, how far are these idiots from the 60 million who voted for Donald Trump? The New York Times just asking questions. They're just asking questions. It's a disgrace, isn't it? All right, Buck Sexton in for Glenn. We'll be right back. Buck Sexton here in for Glenn Beck today on the Glenn Beck program. Phone lines are open, 888-727-BECK. Do give us a call. Would love to chat with you. So this has now become one of the favorite games of the media, though, is every time you see 5 people somewhere, or 50, or who cares, it's insignificant, it's small, gathering together saying they're white nationalists, or they're alt-white, or they're the Klan, or I don't even, whatever. Holding up their hand saying, hey, I'm a racist moron. Anytime this happens somewhere, you're going to have this, has Trump denounced yet? Has he denounced yet? You may think to yourself, well, wasn't there that whole problem where David Duke of the KKK endorsed Donald Trump? No, he actually never endorsed him. I think he said some positive things about Trump. He didn't formally endorse him. Also, who cares? And Trump said many times over the course of the campaign that he disavows that and that these are bad people and he doesn't like them. There was one time where he didn't say it quickly enough and sort of spaced out, it seemed to me, in an interview. And then the next day he's like, yeah, of course I disavow it. That's terrible. But the only one you heard about was the day when he was on that interview on CNN, and they felt like he wasn't vociferous enough in his denunciation of David Duke of the KKK, who I haven't even heard of this guy in years. It's been a long time since anyone's mentioned the name David Duke, but when it comes to Donald Trump. And now you have the transition team receiving criticism on CNN from David Gergen, just because, I don't know. David Gergen's over there talking about the Trump transition team. This is what he had to say. Play clip 1.
The fear that spread across the country about what's coming and the denials that there was any racism in the administration, there was any sort of anti-Semitism in the new incoming administration. Here we have a blatantly anti-Semitic, blatantly racist, anti-woman, all the different things you can think of, and they've declared this is a white nation, and we are, for whites, this is conquer or die. Now, that's terrible messages around the country to people of color, to Jews, and to so many others.
Yeah, we all know. Nobody likes these people. What does the Republican administration have to do with any of this? Oh no, they have to denounce this. No, they have nothing to do with this. This is not their problem. Does the Democratic Party have to constantly, anytime the new Black Panther Party gets together and says some crazy stuff, does the Democratic Party have to get together and be like, whoa, we denounce them? Are they going to be asked about that on national TV? I mean, this is just nonsense that's going on here. There are real things to talk about in the country. The Trump team is going to have very serious problems ahead, trying to get them to focus on some bunch of... Sitting here in for Glenn Beck today on the Glenn Beck program. I mean, this is, wow, even for Donald Trump. He had a media summit with some very powerful figures in the media in attendance. And it was described, now it was off the record, so that's always interesting because you've got people who are relying on sources that are really not supposed to be talking to tell you about this meeting. And it was off the record, but here's what we know according to the Post, and I think it's on CNBC, a few other places too, that this media summit with Trump and some of the most powerful figures in TV news was like a blanking firing squad. Wow. Quote, Trump started with CNN chief Jeff Zucker and said, I hate your network. Everyone at CNN is a liar and you should be ashamed. The quote goes on. The meeting was a total disaster. The TV execs and anchors went in there thinking they would be discussing the access they would get to the Trump administration, but instead they got a Trump-style dressing down. There were 30 or 40 people, including big news anchors from all the networks in attendance. So Trump more or less pulled together the media equivalent of a meeting of the 5 families, right? He brought them all into one room. And they're thinking that he's going to probably say, hey, let's let bygones be bygones. I'm going to be the president. Let's all be friends and let's talk. And there'll be a lot of transparency for my administration, that sort of thing. And instead, he let them have it. And did not go the way they thought it would. It's Trump's spokeswoman Kellyanne Conway said, quote, excellent meetings with the top executives of the major networks. Pretty unprecedented meeting we put together in 2 days. So, I don't know. If you listen to Kellyanne, it was fine. It was fine. There's no problem. If you listen to these anonymous sources speaking to the Post and others, oh my, it was quite a throwdown. How could Trump not, at some level, harbor deep resentment for the way the media continues to treat him? Look, it was one thing when it didn't look like he was going to win, right? It was one thing when, was it the Huffington Post or was it BuzzFeed? Or maybe it was basically both, I don't really recall now, but decided that they would cover our president-elect now as, what was it, comedy or entertainment it was, as entertainment, not as news. It was going to go in the entertainment section. Oh, who's laughing now? Trump won. And yet the media still not only tries to undermine him all the time, there is, as I've discussed with you before, including yesterday, this effort out there to make sure that there's no normalization, because he's abnormal. He's out of the mainstream. You could say he's outside the Overton window. People claim that he's the one that's moving it. Well, they're trying to say that he himself is outside of civil discussion about all these things. That's a pretty astounding place for the media to be, and that they'd be so dressed down shows you that he doesn't care. They're not going to turn around and decide that they like him. He doesn't need them. What is he, almost 70 years old? Guy's worth whatever it is, a billion, a few billion. Doesn't care what the media thinks. They're not going to change their mind. The one thing they won't undo is tell the entire country you're a racist. So that's for people who thought that this was all one big game for Trump, that this was just the biggest reality TV show he had ever been in. You got to think to yourself, well, did he really want to be considered or be called at least a racist by every major media outlet across the country? Would this be good for his businesses? Would this be good for the future of his family name, which is estimated by him literally to be worth billions of dollars? I don't know if that's accurate or not, but the point here being that's certainly out there. He thinks that his name is very important. He thinks that it's a means for future Trump generations to be making money. He's taking a lot of heat on all this. Media doesn't un-racism you. That doesn't happen. You don't get to come back from this in their eyes. So he figures, why not just let them know that he knows what they're all about, and he's going to tear into them a little bit. And what are they going to do? Go on TV and say bad things about him? They're already there. They've already spent all they've got. It's like they've been firing a BB gun at a freight train all this time, and they didn't know it. It's not stopping him. He doesn't care. And I think that for a lot of people across the country, whether it's you at home worried that you say the wrong thing, even when talking about politics, and all of a sudden your friends kind of look at you strangely, or even worse, if you're at the office and you make a comment that you think is completely within the realm of acceptable political discourse, and all of a sudden you're in the HR office. They're like, we need to have a talk with you about the comments that you made. What kind? That was like the law until a year ago, and now I'm going to be fired for that? Well, this is a violation of HR policy 272. This is what we all deal with. We're all sick of it. People see what Trump does, and they think to themselves, at least somebody can be beyond this. At least somebody doesn't have to cower in fear every time someone in the media wants to, shake the racism sign in their face. There's a sort of a catharsis for many of us, a sense that, oh, well, at least we're sort of living vicariously through Trump's invulnerability on this. Because everybody's sick of it. Everybody who's not playing that game is tired of it. I certainly know I am. We can take some calls. 888-727-BECK is the number. We got Mark in Florida on the line. Mark, good to talk to you. Thanks for calling in.
Good morning. I hope I come across eloquent and not sounding like a complete blathering idiot. First and foremost, I'm Jewish. I'm conservative in my Jewish, and the thing is that the Reform movement, which is the largest movement of Judaism in the country, which is so far off what Judaism is all about, is bashing and completely bashing everyone else who doesn't fall within what they feel should be the norm. They're bashing Trump, they're bashing the administration, and they're calling the rest of us anti-Semitic. They're calling other Jews anti-Semitic. And I had a Reformed person tell me through Facebook yesterday that when they come for the Jews, they hope I'm first in line for the gas chambers. I don't get this. These people, the left movement of Reformed Judaism, which is supposed to be the most tolerant, most liberal, most understanding, is absolutely breeding intolerance in this country. And it is not what Judaism is about, and it's not what this country is about. And they have no understanding of what's going on. They have no understanding of what's happened to the U.S. relationships with Israel over the past 8 years and how it's deteriorated so bad and how the new administration is going to correct that. They have no clue as to what is going on with the economy. They believe everything they hear in the media.
Mark, let me ask you, what do you say to your friends who are, Mark, hold on a second. What do you say to your friends who are Jewish when, or let me ask, do they say to you that they believe Trump is an anti-Semite? That's another media meme that's out there right now. Do you hear that, and what do you say to them?
I said, if he's such an anti-Semite, how come his children are married? How come his daughter has become Orthodox? Look at his son-in-law. How can he be anti-Semitic? Oh, because some of the things he said. Show me anything that he has said. Show me anything that Bannon has specifically said that's anti-Semitic. Show me anything that anyone in his cabinet has said that is actually anti-Semitic. And you know what? They can't do it. Well, NBC said this. Well, CNN said that. No. Show me a quote. Let me see a quote. I dare you to find one. And then the response was, well, when they come for you, I hope you're first in line. Hope you're first for the gas chamber.
Well, yeah,
and this
horrible.
is another Jew saying this to me.
Horrible thing to say. People have lost their minds over this, Mark. They've lost all sense of decorum and basic decency in their conversations with each other. I don't know when they're going to sort of give this up, but I hope it's soon. I hope they, as I was saying yesterday, just chill a little bit. It's going to be okay. The people are not going to get rounded up in camps here. There's not going to be some horrible catastrophe that befalls the American people because Donald Trump has been elected. Everybody needs to calm. Yeah, the tax rate may change a little bit. Yeah, they may tighten up a little bit on the borders and illegal immigration. Some things will change, but it's all going to be okay. They're going to get rid of some parts of Obamacare, maybe other parts that will stay for a while until they can come up with something better. This is government. This is policy. This is politics. This is not the end of the republic. But it makes me think that if Hillary had won and gotten her way, given the way that her fans react to the loss, maybe it would have been the end of the republic. The biggest advertisement, period, for voting for Donald Trump up to this point has been the reaction of the pro-Hillary left in defeat. To me, more than anything else, everybody who went to the polls and voted for Trump was kind of like, well, I don't know about this, and I know plenty of them, and I certainly had my misgivings, though I did vote for him. See what's going on now, the marches in the streets, the way the media is treating him, the way that they're just distorting facts, and the way that they're trying to create a narrative of racism and anti-Semitism and all this stuff around him, and say to myself, we don't want their person in charge. We don't want these people in the media to be determining the future of this country, so let's give it a shot. But Mark, in Florida, good to talk to you. I appreciate it. Buck Sexton in for Glenn Beck. Got a lot more calls, got a lot more to talk about. We will be back in California. Lovely place, bad politics. People have talked about California, Calexit, the California secession movement. They've been saying this is gathering steam ever since Trump's victory. Well, they've taken an official step as of, when was this? Yesterday, I see here. We have secessionists formally launching, according to the LA Times, a quest for California's independence. Isn't this fascinating, by the way? Because, you see, if California secedes from the Union, which is not going to happen, but they've got it on them, they're going to get a ballot measure going here. If California secedes from the Union, then what happens to the Democratic Party? They're never going to win another national election. California is the anchor of all of their aspirations in the Democratic Party in this country. Without California, it's all over. They're not going to win another national election. Now, I don't think they've thought it that far through because they know it's not going to happen. But that just goes to show you what an impulsiveness is at work here with the, oh, we lost the election, Hillary's not going to be president, let's create our own country with California. If they were to do that, it would mean that the other 49 states would be under Republican administrations for the foreseeable future, for decades to come, without California's electoral votes, without its population, without its members in the House of Representatives, without all of its political weight, its donor base. I mean, how are Barack and Hillary and, well, whoever's going to be taking their place at the head of the Democratic Party going forward, how are they going to have $30,000 a plate dinners with Clooney and Lady Gaga and whoever else is cool? I don't know. Jay-Z and all the rest of the fancy Hollywood folks. If Hollywood is no longer a part of the union, you'd think that if that was a separate country, then they couldn't donate to the presidential election. So, yeah, a lot of problems with this idea. You could say, Bach, it's not serious. And I agree with you. It's not. This is not going to happen. I think California would be it would be an interesting place if it was its own country. It does politically in some ways feel like it's really not its own country, like it's in another universe, like it's not actually a part of our solar system. Lovely along the beach, though. Highway 1, quite nice to drive. Lots of good stuff there. Although you go inland from the coast in California and you start to think, where am I? But the secession movement in California, I also recall when people would make fun of Texas and Alaska for having any sort of secession party or secession talk. I wonder if they're going to be so dismissive of these concerns in California. The state attorney general's office, according to the New York Times, will give the ballot measure a title and summary, and they're hoping to begin collecting signatures to get it on the ballot in the spring. So, yes, California doesn't have major financial backing, but somebody who's involved with it says they've got 13,000 people who have volunteered to collect signatures. So they've got that going for them, which is nice, I guess. So California may become its own country. It's already in a way its own planet, but they may go a step further and try to get a secession movement going. I think California's going to want to stay in America. I'm just putting that out there. I don't think this would be a referendum that would go the way of the panicked Calexiteers. Is that what we would call them? They want to get out of there. They can't even wait to see what the administration's like. They can't even see if Trump, I don't know, maybe Trump is a moderate. Could be. We were told in the beginning of the primary when people were just making fun of the whole thing that he'd been a lifelong Democrat, right? We've got that photo of him with Hillary and Bill at his wedding. Maybe they should just take a little bit of a wait and see. I don't know. But no. California must be its own country, they say. You can't make this stuff up, everybody. All right, we've got a lot more coming up in just a few minutes. Buck Sexton in for Glenn. Stay right here. Sexton in for Glenn Beck today on the Glenn Beck program. We're joined now by Ann Coulter, who has tons of bestsellers, including Adios America and her latest, E Pluribus Awesome, In Trump We Trust. Ann, great to have you.
Great to be here, Buck.
So have you gotten tired yet of people telling you you were right, how did you know, all that sort of stuff? Do you have like a special mailbox you've set up just for all of that?
Not at all. Or in Trump's America, I wake up every day with a smile on my face.
What do you think of Trump going in to meet with all these media bigwigs yesterday, and from what the reports are at least, giving them, I think, what you could call a piece of his mind?
It's fantastic. It's like Christmas every day. They really deserve it. The media has just decided to, or had decided to completely sacrifice its credibility. And what did they get out of it? They didn't elect Hillary anyway. I've never seen anything like this. I've read about the Goldwater era and the McCarthy era. It's nothing like what they threw at Trump. And then they have the audacity to sit back and say, oh, it's our fault. We created him. No, they lied nonstop. I mean, just to take two, and I have a lot of these in my book, In Trump We Trust, but two examples. One is the really vicious and ugly claim being made to this day that Donald Trump mocked a disabled man. as this website. I write about it in my book before these videos had come out, because I found it highly implausible, even without the rock-solid proof that it's a lie. For one thing, Trump was flailing his arms and his mouth was hanging open, and he had good reason to attack the reporter who denied his own reporting about Muslims celebrating the 9/11 attack. The Washington Post fact checker, just to give you the background, the Washington Post fact checker had given Donald Trump 4 Pinocchios for claiming Muslims in New Jersey celebrated after 9/11. Their position was absolutely no Muslims had celebrated. And then, slowly reports came in where there are provably hundreds of Muslims celebrating in New Jersey and the boroughs around New York. So that was, once again, the media pretending not to understand a figure of speech. I noticed they were doing it for something again today. If I say I called you 1,000 times, that doesn't literally mean 1,000 times. But from the Washington Post's own reporting, I mean, they put Glenn Kessler, Mr. Fact Checker at the Post, claimed he had put his whole team on this. But how do you prove the donut hole? There's nothing there. So Donald Trump produces an article from the Washington Post itself about a week after 9/11, saying that Muslims had celebrated in New Jersey, and the reporter of that article, to curry favor with his media bosses, denied his own reporting. Said that the report was not true. So that was the report he was attacking. But the point is, his disability is almost exactly the opposite of what Trump was doing. The reporter's wrists are locked in place. He's not epileptic. He doesn't flail around. And then Catholics for Truth came out. This is the proof positive that shows not only was the media lying, but they knew they were lying and were going out of their way to hide their lies. Catholics for Truth put up these videos of Trump doing the exact same imitation in that same speech of a flustered general. There's another one of Trump doing the exact same imitation of a flustered Ted Cruz. He even does the exact same imitation of himself being flustered. And when Catholics for Truth posted this comment on a Washington Post article, this is the consciousness of guilt part, posted, actually, this is just how Donald Trump does a flustered person, as you can see in this video from the same speech. The Washington Post took that comment down. There was nothing offensive about it. There were no, anti-Semitic slurs or racism or anything. It was just.
You mean there weren't flustered generals? There weren't flustered generals all across the country who were saying, "How dare you"?
And that shows consciousness of guilt. They didn't want anyone to see that video. And much more quickly, I would just say, even liberals are now admitting the claim that Trump was saying, and it is repeated as if it's a fact to this day, that Trump was referring to Megyn Kelly's period when he said blood was coming out of her eyes, blood coming out of her wherever. Come on, in the same interview, he said essentially the same thing about Charles Krauthammer.
Wait, and there's more recent media stuff that I want to ask you about, like the big meeting, the huge meeting of white nationalists in D.C. getting a lot of attention the last couple of days. I think they might have had enough for a full softball match.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Buck, this is so insane. These irrelevant people holding an irrelevant meeting, and by the way, with absolutely zero connection to Donald Trump or anyone on his team or anyone who might possibly be on his team. And this is covered like it is a serious, like it is a thing that he has to. The fact that he hasn't denounced it, I've seen on cable news, is evidence in and of itself that Trump isn't hard enough on white supremacists. It's this is what they're saying. We've got to start demanding denunciations from. Why isn't? Democrats are repeatedly endorsed by the Communist Party USA. They are repeatedly, when they run for president, endorsed by communist dictators. Willie Horton endorsed Michael Dukakis. My guess is he was voting for Hillary. Can we get endorsements or disavowals for all of that? It's just so crazy how they have to go. I mean, I'm not sure David Duke even exists, as I've written. I think he is. This is a myth, because the only time you hear about him is every 4 years when Democrats, or rather, excuse me, the media demand that the Republican running for president disavow this irrelevant man.
Now, we have the Trump administration getting a fair amount of heat continuously from the media about not denouncing these kinds of things. I just want to know, do you think at some point they will tire of this? Because I thought that the protesters, the people that are already upset about a Trump administration that hasn't even come into being yet, I've actually walked through some of these protests where it seems like they just want to spew profanity and yell things about how Trump won. They're very upset. Do they get tired, or are we looking at 4 years of Trump is the reason for the rise of white nationalism? And, oh, there was a conference of 50 of them. Didn't you hear about it somewhere? Is this ever going to get old for them, or is this the playbook?
Apparently it's not. I must say, Buck, at first I was a little bit worried. Don't criticize them too much, because this is really not helping them. But no, I mean, I think we can make fun of them until the cows come home, and they will not stop. The Democratic Party moved from a normal political party to more of a elitist, celebrity, coastal lifestyle party about 30 years ago, and they really just do not care about getting votes from anyone who isn't already, a millennial or a celebrity. And you've probably talked to people, I've talked to people who, for various reasons, perhaps some of them were Democrats, some just didn't like Trump, didn't vote for Trump. And having seen the way the left is reacting, if they could vote now, they'd vote for Trump.
Yeah, the biggest advertisement for a Trump vote that I've yet come across is the way that everybody on the left has reacted in response to the Trump victory. Are you having any success, by the way, in calming people down? I live in New York. I know you spend a fair amount of time in New York. I have intelligent, well-intentioned friends who were very pro-Hillary, and they're actually afraid. And I keep trying to tell them, why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? It's going to be okay. I don't know what else to say.
I don't have the afraid ones. I do have the ones who didn't vote for Trump. But I think what will prove it in the end, and I have told, even random people I run into on the plane who will tell me they're afraid. That's where I run into the afraid ones. Don't worry. What is going to redeem Donald Trump, unless he doesn't pursue anything he was saying, and I don't think that's the case. I think we're getting a wall. He's already said he's going to scuttle these job-killing trade deals. I think if he pursues, half of his program, although I hope he's not listening because I want him to pursue 100% of it, but if he pursues half of it, it is going to be so great for the country. This is the Republican candidate or Democratic candidate I've been waiting for my entire life, at least on the issues and the policies that, drop the obsession. And I love tax cuts. I think it's bad for the government to take so much of our money. It's very controlling, and I think people can spend it better. Don't get me wrong on this, but this Republican obsession with tax cuts as the be-all, end-all of a booming economy, how does that help people without jobs? Meanwhile, we have lived in a country where middle-class and working-class wages have been flat or going down for the past 30 years. We have hollowed out the industrial base of America. We have the working class competing with both legal and illegal low-wage workers, immigrants coming in. Just to first, let's get the jobs back. And I might add, I love that Trump did not come out for cutting entitlements, the passion of the Paul Ryan types. How about we start with not allowing immigrants to come in and immediately start collecting Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security and see how much money we have left over to pay for Americans who have paid into it their entire lives.
One more for you, Ann, then we'll let you go. I know you're busy. We're talking to Ann Coulter, author of In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus Awesome. What did you think about the little lecture that Hamilton gave Mike Pence over the weekend? And also, have you seen Hamilton, and what are your thoughts on it if you have?
I have not. I find it curious that we live in such a PC world that the only way we can honor the founders is if they're in blackface. We'll start with that. So I don't care about people telling me, oh, it's so great and it's historical. I wasn't all that interested in seeing it to begin with. And the lecture from the stage, this is exactly what I mean. They cannot learn. They're in this bubble. They will not reconsider because, wow, every place that guy goes, he's going to get a standing ovation. But, I always think of it when you watch Hollywood movies, TV shows. One classic genre is the brave and righteous man against an angry mob, from To Kill a Mockingbird to Tina Fey's Mean Girls. But then whenever it comes to real life, look who the Mean Girls is. That isn't a dialogue. That isn't a political discussion. That is humiliating the vice president-elect in front of a cheering crowd. Liberals are always the mob. They are always the Mean Girls.
Ann Coulter, author of In Trump We Trust, E Pluribus Awesome, and Adios America. And thanks for joining.
Good to talk to you, Buck. Bye-bye.
Buck Sexton in for Glenn. We'll be back in a few. Buck Sexton here in for Glenn today on the Glenn Beck program. Wanted to take some calls. 888-727-BECK is the number. We have Gerald in Pennsylvania. Gerald, you're on the Glenn Beck program. You were speaking to Buck.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good. I got to take you off speaker here. Hey, the
Thank you
topic
for that.
with the racism came up today, and one of the reasons I voted for Trump, believe it or not, was a Dan Rather interview I saw on Access TV. And it was curious. They were interviewing someone from the Southern Poverty Law Center who was trying to make a point that Trump was a racist, but in the sentence said that Trump didn't run in 2000 under the Reform Party because that was David Duke's party. He wanted nothing to do with being associated with that. And I'm wondering why the snippet doesn't come up and we don't see it more often. Because I don't know how many times you have to disavow someone. And I was not a Trump supporter, but seeing that kind of said, okay, I feel a little bit safer here.
I do recall that. It's come up, but the media has spent very little time reminding people that Trump denounced David Duke many years ago. He said in 2000, many years ago when he ran for president. So he's been on record for a long time saying David Duke is a disgusting and disgraceful person. So they just keep asking him, and then finally he doesn't denounce quickly enough, or he sort of stumbles in an interview and says, I have to look into that, and the next day he denounces, and they say, oh, well, he doesn't denounce. Well, I mean, he's been denouncing for 15 or 16 years. I mean, look, I just don't buy. I've had plenty of time. I've spent plenty of time criticizing Trump. I'm well aware of the flip-flops. I'm well aware of all the lack of conservative principle. I get all of that. But is he a racist? No. Don't believe he's a racist. Sorry.
Right.
So,
right.
and the media is not trying to convince me he's not conservative. He's going to sell you out. He's a flip-flopper. He's not even really a Republican. They're just trying to convince us that he's a racist and a sexist. That's it. That's been the entire focus, and I think that's part of why they failed.
Right, and I think a lot of this, I have friends that are college educators, and one of the things I'm hearing from them is that their students are absolutely afraid, like literally afraid, and I keep hearing the word fear. But my thought goes back to, that's because you keep telling them to be afraid. And no one's listening, no one's hearing, no one wants to be empathetic to any other side when you're afraid and you get stuck in your own echo chamber. And I think that that helps to create the division and to foment the division.
I mean, I know people are saying things like that. They'll say they're afraid. Then we ask, well, afraid of what? And you will get some answers sometimes, but generally it's just this sort of anxiety that has set into people's minds. And in part, it's because there are a lot of people with platforms, a lot of members of the media, a lot of writers, journalists, pundits, who are, I think, themselves convinced that something terrible is going to befall the country now. And so that then filters down, and a lot of other people buy into it as well. But it's going to be so terrible if we get out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. People live in fear of that. I mean, this is a deal that would have just gone into effect or we've just been talking about it over the last year. We'll be okay, is what I keep trying to tell people. It will be all right. But that makes you seem in the eyes of...
I think that also agrees with the far left had actually supported Bernie Sanders, and that was his position, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, Bernie and Trump had a lot of crossover on trade, and much of the white working class felt a sort of affinity for both the Trump and Bernie campaigns. You remember there was that point in time where people were saying, hold on a second, how can you have the self-described democratic socialist and the sort of ultra-capitalist Donald Trump meeting on some things and their supporters agreeing? And it was on trade, economic issues, and really jobs in the economy. But Gerald, thank you very much for calling in. Good to talk to you. Greg in Florida, you are on the Glenn Beck program. You are speaking to Buck.
Hey, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, I'm down here in sunny Florida. We had to put jackets on this morning. It dropped into the 50s. It's crazy. But
thank you for the
reason
update.
I called, I've been a real estate developer in St. Louis and an entrepreneur my whole life. And I've known people like Trump, not on that level. But here's a guy that is bringing us back from the precipice of economic disaster, and people are fearful. I don't get it. But I said from the beginning, Ann Coulter was funny when she said she didn't think David Duke was a real person. They just roll him out every so often and have him support somebody that we want to think is despicable, by association. That was funny. But I said from the very beginning that both parties and the media was going to go after Trump with everything they had to vilify him, because they're terrified that somebody's going to get in there and upset their entrenched interest by the special interest groups and the powers that
yeah, Greg, the worst thing that can happen for the Democratic Party under a Trump administration is that he does well. The worst thing that can possibly happen is that some of these things that he's promising to do, specifically on the economy, will have an obviously positive impact. Because then they can call him a racist till the cows come home. Who cares? It's not going to be enough if he is successful with the implementation of some of his ideas. Thank you for calling in. Buck, Sexton, and for Glenn, we've got a lot more. Going to talk about some national security for Glenn Beck today. We are talking a bit about national security coming up here. We will do it in what we call a Buck Brief. Pregent joins us now. He's an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute, where he's a senior Middle East analyst, and he's also a former military intelligence officer. Great to have you, Michael. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks, Buck. Thanks for having me.
All right. The effort to take Mosul back from the Islamic State is now many weeks underway. What is the latest in this battle against ISIS on the ground in northern Iraq?
Well, it's slowed down to a crawl. As the Iraqi security forces are starting to enter from the east, they're encountering a lot of resistance, but they're not getting the U.S. Air support or artillery support that they had counted on. And that's because the United States is not going to provide artillery and air support to a predominantly Shia force as they enter a predominantly Sunni town where there's still a population of almost 1 million people still there. So that's why it's slowed down to a crawl.
And so far, the humanitarian issues that have been concerns leading up to this about refugees fleeing the area, the numbers are surging. Are the proper authorities and resources in place to try to handle the outflow of refugees, or are they becoming overwhelmed?
Well, they're already becoming overwhelmed. I think there's 50,000 refugees that have left Mosul so far, and they are running out of food supplies of some of these organizations. But what's more telling is the direction in which the refugee flow is going. The refugees aren't going to the west where the Shia militias are. They're not going to the south where the Iraqi military is. They're preferring to go to places where the Peshmerga are control of territory, because the Peshmerga have a heavier U.S. presence, and they believe that the U.S. can actually act as a guarantor, where they don't feel necessarily the same way about moving towards predominantly Shia forces. And one of the things we're seeing is when CNN, Fox, BBC report on this, they're saying that the Iraqi military is separating the women and children from the men. Now, that is a normal process, a process that is more comfortable when the U.S. is doing the vetting along with Peshmerga to make sure that any military-age male who's actually affiliated with ISIS is screened out. The problem is when the Iraqi security forces do this, or when the Shia militias do this, they basically say that any Sunni military-age male is likely a collaborator with ISIS. And we've seen people disappeared off the battlefield in Fallujah, Ramadi, and Tikrit when the Shia militias and the predominantly Shia Iraqi military are left in charge of this process.
Now, as U.S. support directly to the Peshmerga is limited, because we don't want to be, well, we don't want to be, one, taking any casualties, but also don't want to be too close to some of the battle. They want it to be an Iraqi-led force, and they want the tip of the spear to be Iraqi as much as possible. The Shia militias, it seems, are going to be more heavily utilized in this process, which could bring about some serious sectarian tension.
What I'm looking at now is you look at the forces that are participating in the Mosul operation. It's a counterterrorism service. A lot of these guys are already bandaged from previous battles. They're going in with wounds that they sustained fighting into Crete, Ramadi, and Fallujah. They're taxed. These guys are tired. They're effective, but they're just overstretched. The 15th Iraqi Army or 15th Iraqi Army Division is out of Baghdad. So these are all Shia soldiers, a lot of them affiliated with Jaish al-Mahdi, Muqtada al-Saddah's group. The 9th Iraqi Army Division is all Shia. Now notice, I just talked about the Iraqi Army units. They're already heavily infiltrated with militias, except they wear uniforms. They're still flying sectarian flags. Now the Shia militias in the West, as they move to Tel Afar, they're going in and they're starting to cause some problems there. What I'm looking at now is, where do these Shia militias put their artillery and their rockets? Because the United States and the coalition is not going to blow up civilian neighborhoods like the Iraqi military and the militias did in Fallujah and Ramadi. So if you keep track of these Shia militias where they put their artillery and rockets, that'll be very telling, because as they move into range of Mosul, they will start hitting these neighborhoods where these population centers are still in play.
Is there any sense that you've picked up from your contacts on the ground that the Sunni Arabs who live in Mosul, a city which no one really knows how many people live there now, but in the past it's been about 1 million people, do you get any sense from those who are in contact with Sunni Arabs there that they feel like it's a good thing, obviously, that the Islamic State is hopefully going to lose control of Mosul within weeks, maybe months, but it's certainly taken a very long time for the Iraqi government to get to this point. It feels like an unacceptable delay, despite the fact that it's a positive development that this is happening. It took, what, 2 years?
Well, I would argue we never really defeated or controlled Mosul when the U.S. was there. We developed networks. We developed relationships with tribal leaders. We built a Sunni intelligence network, and we slowly used an intelligence-backed strategy to decimate al-Qaeda leadership, which led to their demise, using the Sons of Iraq and the Awakening. I think that this is a great opportunity to do that, put that back in play now. Obviously, you're not going to be able to take Mosul if the civilian population stays there and the U.S. is unwilling to provide air support and artillery. And you just don't do that because of the indiscriminate targeting and the civilian casualties. Now is the time to slow it down, start developing Sunni sources, have them provide intelligence, because they've been doing that. They've given intelligence to the Peshmerga and some of the Iraqi security forces that have pinpointed ISIS locations, that have allowed U.S. airstrikes to come in. I think right now, if I was able to advise somebody on it, I'd say let's slow it down. Let's make it an intelligence-driven operation that empowers the Sunni population in Mosul with manpower and intel to go after ISIS, and then create that political space for them to start building trust with Baghdad again. But that requires huge leverage on our part with Baghdad, to increase that leverage, to pull those levers to make sure that we make Baghdad a government that the Sunni population in Iraq can trust again. And that's going to be the hardest challenge.
In this clearing operation, your expectation, Michael, is that this will last months at this point?
Well, there could be a PR victory where they say, hey, listen, we replaced the flag in the center of Mosul and we've defeated ISIS. Because if you look at Ramadi, Fallujah, and Tikrit, that's exactly what happened. But if you look at any of those three cities today, you'll still see that there are ISIS networks active, and that they're still able to conduct high-profile attacks, to include Baghdad. So there can be a victory that the media celebrates, that ISIS has been defeated in Mosul, and I would argue that that isn't going to happen until the Sunni population of northern Iraq trusts Baghdad. So I see this going on for a while. Like I said, we were there from 2003 to 2011, and there were still pockets of resistance in Mosul, and they just chose not to attack us.
Michael, switching gears one more question for you. You're former U.S. military. What do you think about the likely pick of General Mattis for Secretary of Defense?
I love the pick. I hope he takes it because he balances everything that people are worried about with the Trump administration. He's hard on Russia. He's hard on Iran. He's pragmatic. He believes that the use of military force needs to be one where you only put the military in if you want to win and you're going to empower them to win. I hope he takes the position. He'd be a great voice, a great pragmatic voice, a well-respected voice, and I think he would stay the concerns of most Middle Eastern leaders on what the next administration looks like over the next 4 years.
Michael Pregent is an adjunct fellow at the Hudson Institute. Mike, always great to have you. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, thanks, Buck. Thanks for having me.
888-727-BECK. Buck Sexton in for Glenn. We'll be back in a few. Down the road from where I went to school at Amherst College, but Hampshire did something pretty, even for Hampshire. The day after the election, this is the Washington Post, some people at Hampshire College reacted to the news of Donald Trump's victory by calling for the removal of the American flag at the center of campus, saying it was a symbol of racism and hatred. That night, some lowered it, and the following night, sometime before dawn, on Veterans Day, people burned it. So you have Hampshire College doing that. I don't know if you saw this, but last night, there was actually an exchange between, and then Hampshire now I think has gotten rid of all American flags on campus. This is how they're dealing with this. Look, it's a pretty hippie-ish place. Not even sure if that's the proper description of it. When I was at Amherst College, we used to call it Hampshire. I'm just saying. They also have politics that are they're not even left. They're kind of off the spectrum. They're in a whole other planet. But there was an exchange last night. I saw it on Fox on Tucker Carlson's new show with a student from Hampshire College, and they were discussing this issue where Hampshire College has removed American flags after Donald Trump's. They've just gotten rid of all of them now because they're worried that people are going to burn them, that they'll be, and other people view it, and I mean students on the campus view this as some form of, it's like a symbol of oppression, something along those lines. How do people get to this level of lunacy with their politics at such a young age? It's an interesting question, isn't it? You look at some of these schools and the way that they view their own history, and Hampshire's a great example of this. You've got kids who are, I guess, young adults, if we're going to be proper, who are spending close to $60,000 a year to go to a school like that. It's a private college, and they think that the American flag is a symbol of oppression. When I was at Amherst, there was at a meeting of students for actual healing. Like now they have meetings to heal because of Trump's victory, but this was right after September 11th. I was in college. And some students from Hampshire College came over to our school and rolled out American flags and burned them because I suppose to them, after 9/11, they wanted to make the point that America brought this on itself with its imperialistic policies. And they were talking about Native Americans and genocide and South America and Pinochet. I mean, all this stuff was sort of thrown in there. This is right after 9/11. There's a flag burning. I'll never forget it. Flag burning on my campus. And what's fascinating to me is that you have professors, the cowardice that will be on display for some of these things. Professors will say, well, they have a right to do this. And yes, legally speaking, technically speaking, they're correct. But usually professors on these campuses will shout down anything. I mean, you use the wrong pronoun for somebody, you do anything that in any way, shape, or form could be considered offensive, and there'll be professors doing a walkout. Supreme Court Justice Scalia, may he rest in peace, he came to speak at my school, and the entire political science department, except for one, or maybe two, but one of them was my advisor, boycott his speech. Refused to go. This is the political science department at a school that thinks itself fancy. They didn't want to hear a sitting Supreme Court justice address the college campus. This stuff is just out of control. But at Hampshire, it goes beyond just childish, and it goes beyond wrong-headed and wrong thinking to bizarre, to completely outside of what would be considered rational or reasonable. And they think that burning flags is a way to show their disapproval of Trump's victory. On top of that, their answer to it is to pull down all flags. And they were even willing to, on Veterans Day, destroy flags. I don't know how we can reach these students. I don't know how we can get them to better understand how off they are, how wrong they are when it comes to all of these things. I would just say that if you watched last night, it was some very interesting TV. Tucker Carlson on Fox going up against this Hampshire college student. He was perfectly polite to him, just asked some questions. And the Hampshire kid is making a mockery of himself, but he loves it because he thinks that this is what intelligent, thoughtful people say about the world. And what we've seen is that this has gone well beyond college campuses. This is not just a campus phenomenon anymore. Many in the media seem to take a, not quite as extreme as Hampshire College, but a anti-American point of view on our foreign policy, or a blame America first point of view on our foreign policy. And they will defend this kind of behavior. They will shout down so much else that will happen on campuses. And there are all these lectures about campus rape culture and patriarchy, and the media is constantly, the federal government, the Obama administration gets involved in that stuff. But when it comes to getting rid of all American flags from a campus, this is just what they've decided to do, because they think that the flag is a sign, or some students think it's a sign of oppression, and so they burn it. You would think it would be a moment for at least one professor, and we would see it, right, because it would be taped with a phone and put on YouTube, to bring all these kids together and be like, you know what, show some respect, you bunch of babied punks. Buck Sexton here in for Glenn Beck today on the Glenn Beck program. I've got some breaking news for you, which is always fun when you're on radio and it happens right as it's coming in. Donald Trump, according to senior aide, I believe it's Kellyanne Conway, but Donald Trump has said that he will not pursue the criminal case against Hillary Clinton, that is going to be off the table now. Ooh, some of you are probably a little annoyed about this. Others of you will think it's a good idea. I think we should spend some time together talking about the pros and cons of doing this. Or I should say really not doing this, meaning deciding to not continue the prosecution against Hillary Clinton. I was a very early and vocal, not just critic of this whole thing, but I was telling everybody who would listen. I would go on CNN, where I was a contributor. I would say, look, I had a TS clearance. I know the laws about this stuff pretty darn well, and there's no way what Hillary Clinton did in any way, shape, or form would just be sort of let go if we were talking about somebody who wasn't a Clinton. There's just no way. Wouldn't happen. And of course, early on, they're saying, oh, that's just conjecture from you, sir. You don't really know, and there's no classified. Okay, there is classified. Well, it wasn't marked classified. Actually, it was marked classified. Oh, she didn't know about it. Actually, she did know. Oh, you get dizzy with all the lies. I feel like that's actually a Clinton strategy, right? If they throw enough lies at you, it's sort of like being in the batting cage, and you've got a few of them firing at you at once, and you can't handle it. I haven't been in a batting cage in a while. It used to be kind of fun. So, Trump is saying he won't go after Hillary. A couple of things about this. Let's start with why this might upset some people. The first thing is that Trump was talking a lot during the campaign, as I think he should have, about how what Hillary did was very illegal, very wrong, and how there would be accountability, how if you voted for Donald Trump, he would actually try to find some way, he would find some means of holding her accountable through the law. And we knew that there was all kinds of funky stuff going on, not funky like dance party, but funky like, that's not right. The head of the FBI went ahead of the Department of Justice. They make the decision about prosecuting or not prosecuting. The head of the FBI went ahead and said that no reasonable prosecutor would bring charges. Shouldn't we have heard from the prosecutor? In this case, it would have been from Loretta Lynch or one of her top officials, one of those who works for her at the DOJ. But no, it was Comey who went out after Loretta Lynch had sat on that plane on the tarmac with Bill to talk about her, talk about the future of stuff. And they sat down, they had this discussion. It all looked so bad, it looked terrible. Meanwhile, Trump is chanting, lock her up. His supporters are chanting, lock her up. This became one of the sort of rallying cries of the campaign. Lock her up. Could they? If you had appointed a special prosecutor, is it likely, is it possible, well, is it possible first, how about that? And then is it likely that there could be criminal charges brought against Hillary Clinton for what she did? A direct and clear reading of the statute would be yes. Now, what would the guidelines say about this sort of thing? She'd probably take a plea deal. I think it's unlikely, even if she were a non-Clinton, that she would go to jail, probably pay a large fine, have a number of years of probation, and never hold a clearance for the rest of her life. And if she were also a non-political person, meaning if she just worked for an intel agency or a military branch of the military, she would be fired. But that's probably what would happen. But Trump and his supporters were chanting, lock her up. At least the implication there is, well, there should be a full-fledged investigation absent the sort of politics that bails the Clintons out time and again, whether it's Bill or now Hillary. Some could argue that this was a promise that was made. This is on the negative side. And I think that there are going to be those in the Trump camp or those who supported Trump all along who see this and say to themselves, is this the beginning of the waffling, the wavering, the undulating with the political winds? Is this going to be a moment in time when all of a sudden we realize, oh, Trump was saying that stuff to get elected, but he didn't really mean it? Is this a broken promise? I don't think we should go that far. But I don't know. And everyone's entitled to their opinion on this one. But on the negative side of things, you have that. One, seems to be sort of a broken promise from Trump. And then also justice. Hillary did things that are in clear violation of federal statute. Those of you listening who have had a security clearance or have a security clearance, worked in the national security side of things, whether military, intel, or any of the jobs where you'd have to have a clearance, you know how crazy those rules are, how strict they are. And you probably think to yourself, no, she should just be held accountable. Rule of law is rule of law. Rule of law doesn't mean exceptions for people based upon how important they are to one political party or another, how connected they are, how much strife it will cause within our political discussions if they're actually held to account with the law. So you probably think that a special prosecutor appointed by Donald Trump would be a good idea if you take that position. Now let's look at the other side of it for a moment, because this is pretty big, because this means now that the Clintons are going to be able to sort of go off into the sunset. We'll see what the donations are like to the Clinton Foundation. I have a feeling that they're going to be plummeting dramatically over the next year or two. I also think that the speeches that Bill and Hillary will give will be at quite a discounted rate. They'll be rock-bottom prices compared to what they were before, which will prove all of us who were saying that Hillary wasn't selling a speech, she wasn't selling wisdom, she wasn't even selling, and Bill too, that they weren't selling the sort of gravitas that they give an organization. They were selling access, or at least the appearance of access, which is just as bad. Meaning the people buying it thought that's what they were buying. All right? You can't take money, you can't be a politician and take money from somebody and say, yeah, I'll make sure we pass that bill you want me to pass. Don't worry about it, I've got it covered. And then if the FBI is running a sting and you've taken that paper bag full of cash, you don't get to say, well, I wasn't really going to vote that way. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Come on. It's not how it works. So the Clintons get to continue on. I think that their political brand is forever damaged by all of this. I don't think you can expect there'll be a Clinton dynasty that sort of continues on after this whole... Remember, this is the second time Hillary's been the inevitable candidate. This is the second time the Clintons have had all of the media, all of the machinery behind them. They couldn't get it done either time. I mean, you know, to borrow from W, fool me once, can't get fooled again. Can't get fooled again. So now let's look at this is a good idea for Trump's side of the issue. And I will tell you, to be upfront about it, I think it is. And I know some of you, I'm going to get some emails, I'm going to get some Facebook messages from current or former military or intel, some of my intel brothers inside Langley and other places. They're going to be mad at me for this one. I understand that, but let me make my case about why I think this is the right move for Trump. As long as you're okay with Trump kind of breaking his word on this one. Lock her up was just theatrics, I guess. Okay, it was just theatrics. Or maybe you just take the position that he looked at the facts and he's changing his mind based on the circumstances of today. That's usually what politicians do, by the way, when they want to change their mind about something. They go out and they tell you, well, things are different now. Are they different because they are, because the politician wants them to be? Leave that to you. So by Trump not pursuing this, you have, one, the possibility of unity. Do you buy that? Given that the Democrats are hell-bent, it seems, on creating the perception that Trump is the sort of modern reincarnation of either the KKK or the neo-Nazis or the alt-right neo-Nazi KKK consortium, whatever it is, they seem to be under the impression that they can convince it. If they just keep hammering this, they will convince Americans that that's who Donald Trump is, and so they stay on this, which makes it seem like unity is kind of a tough thing to pull off, right? It's one thing when you disagree on the top marginal tax rate. It's one thing when you disagree with how to handle ballooning entitlement spending because of the baby boomers. And you can disagree on that and still sit down and be friends at the end of the day. And I hope that that's where we actually get in our politics. It's a whole nother situation, though, when one side is just pointing a finger at the other side and saying, you support somebody who's morally the equivalent of a KKK member, maybe not actually in the KKK, but somebody who's really, really bad. It's tough to sit down with them and say, yeah, let's have a civil discussion about all of this. But unity, if you're looking at reasons for why Trump would decide not to pursue charges, and this is just breaking now, not to pursue charges against Hillary Clinton for what she did with her email. Oh, by the way, I believe also that means for what she did at the Clinton Foundation. That one's tough to take, too. Because the legacy of the Clintons, really, more than anything else, is going to be the creation of a vast international enterprise under the guise of a charity that was really using charity as a front for creating a tremendous amount of political clout and brand value and cronies getting all sorts of payoffs and money and paying salaries and building an enterprise that is really a for-profit under the guise of a nonprofit, a for-profit for the Clintons. The end goal of which was not just to make them rich, but also to make Hillary Clinton the president. So that's gone too. But okay, unity, that's one reason. Then there's another one, but this is sort of a contingent reason, right? So on the one hand, we've got, this is bad, Trump is breaking his word, Trump is also not pursuing justice. Right? You can take that position by not going after Hillary with the special prosecutor during his presidency. I guess we could also, by the way, just throw this out there just to make things really crazy. Trump could also change his mind on this. We had a couple of months, he could be like, yeah, I've decided actually she's pretty bad. We're going to go for it. All right, but let's just assume that he's going to keep his word on this one, or this report is true. Then there's the possibility of just the Machiavellian side of this. Trump looks a bit magnanimous in the process, right? Maybe there'll be some goodwill created here. Maybe it's a distraction for the Trump administration that actually realizes that they have a wide open field to do incredible things for this country. Got a Republican House, a Republican Senate, tons of Republican governorships, Republican state houses, wide open. He's made these promises. The people have spoken. We have voted. People want some of the stuff that Trump had said he would do to actually happen. Maybe he realizes that's much more important to many of us, to most of us, than settling a score with Hillary Clinton. And so by doing this, he looks sort of magnanimous in the process. And he looks like he's being gracious to the other side. Do I think he'll be rewarded by the other side for this graciousness? No, I do not. I think that would be a naive point of view to take on it. But for those of fair mind, for those of open mind, for those who are willing to at least judge Donald Trump based on what he does now as president, I'd have to say that moving beyond the prosecution of Hillary Clinton, again, this sort of ties in for the purposes of unity, but it makes Trump look good. It'll make him look good. There's one more thing I just want to throw in there. He says he's not going to prosecute her. Or he's not, I should say, continue the investigation. But if he appointed a special prosecutor, I mean, over 100 classified emails, I mean, this is not hard. They wanted to go after her. They gave her a special pass, created this, well, she didn't mean to exception to a federal statute for which, when you talk about the handling of classified information, there is no special oopsies loophole. And the other side of this is, what if he decides that he's going to pardon her? Now, sort of like a political endorsement that you didn't ask for, a pardon sticks to you no matter what. Hillary can say, well, I didn't want this pardon. Doesn't matter. He can say he's not going to investigate her, but just to be a super duper nice guy, he pardons Hillary Clinton for the email situation. Maybe just that, so that if people want to dig up some other stuff from the past, that's on them. But he pardons her for the email situation. Now you have the would-be standard bearer, or the former standard bearer and would-be president of the Democratic Party with a pardon for criminal activity on her record. Trump looks magnanimous in the process. Trump looks like he's trying to achieve unity. And anytime somebody brings up Hillary and the popular vote or Hillary and the web, they'll be like, Hillary's lucky that she's not walking around in an orange jumpsuit, because did you hear about the pardon? Little Machiavellian. Anything that could stop Trump from doing this? Not that I'm aware of. Anything that makes me think Trump might do this? Yeah, makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Sexton here in for Glenn Beck today. You can download my daily podcast on Blaze Radio at theblaze.com/Buck-Sexton on every day, 12 to 3 Eastern. Please do check it out. Do a show every day here for the Blaze Radio. Also, wanted to talk to you for a moment, if I can, about Trump's YouTube video, which is out talking about his first 100 days. What's he going to do? Let's stop talking about all the mudslinging and the nastiness of the media for a second. Well, he says he's going to do a few things. For example, he's going to ban government officials from becoming lobbyists under certain circumstances. Play clip 7, please.
On ethics reform, as part of our plan to drain the swamp, we will impose a 5-year ban on executive officials becoming lobbyists after they leave the administration, and a lifetime ban on executive officials lobbying on behalf of a foreign government.
So there you have it. Going to actually make it harder to become part of this revolving door system in D.C. where you work for government and then you make money from your work in government by lobbying people in government. He also talked about Trans-Pacific Partnership, a big issue for him on the campaign trail. Play clip 8, please.
On trade, I am going to issue our notification of intent to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a potential disaster for our country. Instead, we will negotiate fair bilateral trade deals that bring jobs and industry back onto American shores.
So Trump says TPP is going to be no more if he has his way. And then perhaps the one that I think might have among the most immediate of all impacts from these sorts of measures, on energy and regulations. Clip 9. Make it happen.
On energy, I will cancel job-killing restrictions on the production of American energy, including shale energy and clean coal, creating many millions of high-paying jobs. That's what we want. That's what we've been waiting for. On regulation, I will formulate a rule which says that for every one new regulation, 2 old regulations must be eliminated.
I like it. You want to cut back regulations? You say if you want to put in one, you got to get rid of 2, right? So it's a plan that I think if he puts into action, we'd see a lot of benefits from pretty quickly. By the way, Keystone XL, he could just be like, what's up, Keystone XL? You're now good to go. All sorts of interesting stuff that the Trump is saying he's going to do. I just called him the Trump. Maybe I'll stay with that. We are joined by author Richard Weikert. He is author of the new book, Hitler's Religion, The Twisted Beliefs That Drove the Third Reich. Richard, thank you very much for giving us a ring.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So there's this debate that's been raging back and forth for a long time, as you point out in your book, Richard. Was Hitler Christian in his mind? Was he an atheist? Was he some combination? What did you find in your book?
Well, yeah, in fact, there's also another one. There's the fact that some people think Hitler was an occultist, too. So there's sort of these three sort of main ideas that sort of floating around, especially in a lot of internet sites and such. And what I found as I investigated this in great depth, and I mean, I studied not only Hitler's own writings and his speeches, where, of course, you can't always trust what he's having to say, which is one of the big problems with this debate, because some people will just take certain things, they'll snatch certain things out of Hitler's public speeches and say, well, Hitler believed it. After all, he said it, as though he never would lie about something that important or something like that, But what I found is I examined his testimony from the associates that were around him, his secretaries, Goebbels' diaries, Rosenberg's diaries, the table talks that Hitler gave in private at his bunker in the last few years of his life. It became very apparent that he was very anti-Christian in his outlook, that he, in his private religious views, although publicly he sort of tried to portray the image so that he didn't offend people's sensibilities. He was very anti-Christian, so he wasn't a Christian. That's very clear. He also wasn't an atheist, which some people think, well, if he wasn't a Christian, maybe he was an atheist. No, he actually wasn't an atheist either. He didn't believe in some kind of high power, higher being, and even in private, he seems to maintain that particular perspective. And he wasn't in the occult either. In fact, there were some people around Hitler who were into astrology, such as Rudolf Hess and Heinrich Himmler, and they were into some kinds of occult kinds of things. So there were some high-ranking Nazis that were dabbling in the occult, but Hitler actually spoke negatively about that behind their backs and actually criticized them for that. And in fact, in one point, he even had astrologers arrested and thrown into concentration camps. So he wasn't involved in the occult either. He was actually more of he was more into science than he was into the occult. But what he did actually believe was that nature was God. So he believed there's some kind of God, but it's just sort of this vague, nature is God, everything in the cosmos is God. And this position is generally known as pantheism. So I identify him as a pantheist.
And didn't Darwinism factor into some of his thinking as well? There was sort of you mentioned that nature rules all. He had his own view of how nature would play out and what that would mean for the Third Reich.
Oh, yes, exactly. And in fact, I have an entire chapter on was Hitler a creationist in this book, because I've been criticized from some of my earlier writings. In some of my earlier books, I've made the connections between evolutionary ethics and Darwinian ethics and Nazism. And some people, in fact, one of my Amazon.com reviews that someone wrote on one of my earlier books said Hitler was a creationist. He wasn't a Darwinist and such. In fact, there's a University of Chicago history professor who wrote a book called Was Hitler a Darwinian? He was actually responding to my earlier books. And he said, no, Hitler wasn't a Darwinian. But if you read Mein Kampf, and especially if you read Hitler's second book, which was never published, it's actually just referred to as Hitler's second book, it's Darwinian through and through. I mean, it's laced with Darwinism. And so in the chapter that I said, was Hitler a creationist? No, he was not a creationist.
So people, Richard, people haven't even heard of this second book that you're mentioning. What does it describe? What does it go into?
Well, actually, his second book was unpublished during his lifetime, and we're not sure exactly why, although there's speculation that some of the foreign policy things that he put in there, he decided he wasn't quite sure about, and so he didn't publish it. But actually, the very first chapter of this, his second book, is entitled The Struggle for Life, which is, by the way, the exact same word that's in the title of The Origin of Species, Darwin's Origin of Species, the words, and struggle for life. So a struggle for life is a synonym for struggle for existence, and it was used quite frequently that way, and Hitler used it that way. And Hitler uses the word struggle for life and struggle for existence quite frequently in there. In fact, the very beginning couple of pages of that first chapter on the struggle for life talks about how the population is expanding faster than the food supply, which is exactly what Darwinian struggle for existence was teaching. And then he says because of that, biological organisms, including humans, are struggling for existence, and the stronger will prevail and the weaker will die out. And he saw that happening in sort of in a racial context. He thought there was a racial struggle for existence going on. And the Aryans, he thought, of course, were the most highly evolved of the human races, and so that they were winning out in the struggle for existence, and that was what made them the master race.
So, Richard, there was also a sort of Malthus aspect to his thinking. He believed that they were running out of food and that the population was growing too rapidly for mankind to sort of sustain itself?
Exactly, and that was Darwin had built upon Malthus's ideas, and Darwin even said that he built on Malthus's ideas, the idea of the struggle for existence. So, and this is if you read Hitler's Mein Kampf too, this comes through very clearly. He talks about the fact that the population is expanding faster than the food supply, and Hitler lays out in one part of Mein Kampf where he says that there's only several solutions to that problem. One of you can restrict your birth, but he says that's not a good idea because then the species will degenerate because you won't have enough variation to, drive evolution forward. The other option is you can just start exporting more goods and importing more food, but he didn't like that idea either. He said the real solution is to expand your living space. And that word living space, by the way, in the German, it's the word Lebensraum. This idea of the Lebensraum or living space actually is an idea that came from a Darwinian biologist turned geographer named Friedrich Ratzel, who in the late 1800s and right at the beginning of the 1900s was pushing this idea that Germans needed more living space in order to evolve to higher levels. And so because they were superior, allegedly, to these other races around them, they needed to compete with those races, push them out of living space. And this is exactly what Hitler was trying to do.
When you look at Nazi Germany at this time, obviously it must have come up in your research, there were many members of the Nazi Party who must have thought themselves both Christians in sort of good standing with the church, but also Nazis. How does that factor into the way that Hitler would try to sort of be the demagogue and the tyrant that he was? I mean, he must have been willing to, at some point, try to co-opt the church while also destroying the church.
Yes, he did, and that's exactly, I think, the right way to phrase it. He did try to co-opt it while trying to destroy it. And you're right, there were a lot of Nazis who would have considered themselves good Christians, and certainly people who voted for the Nazi Party who did. And part of the reason for this is because we've seen this in our own election here that just happened recently, too. There were a lot of people who were so afraid of the communists and leftists that they were willing to go along with someone who seemed to stand for morality.
Traditional, like a quote, traditional morality, yeah.
And such. So they were willing to overlook some of the anti-Christian elements of his ideas. And also Hitler tried to camouflage those, the anti-Christian parts of his program. Just to give you one kind of example, a really kind of fascinating thing in the course of my research, really stumbled upon it when I really didn't expect it. There was a photograph that was taken of Hitler in 1932. So this was just while he was in his campaigning for to come to power. He was not yet named chancellor. That came in January of 1933. So several months earlier, there was this picture taken of him by his personal photographer as he's coming out of this church in Bremerhaven. And there's this white cross that's hovering right above its head that makes him look like he sort of has this halo effect or something. And Heinrich Hoffmann when Hoffmann published this in 1932, he put a caption under that picture which said, "A chance event becomes a symbol. The supposed heretic Hitler coming from the church in Bremerhaven." And so what you were supposed to draw from, the conclusion you were supposed to draw from that picture was, see, Hitler's not a heretic after all. Look, he's coming out of church. So it sort of implies that he went to a church service or something like that. And you have this halo, this white cross right above his head. It's really striking. And I have these photographs, by the way, in my book, Hitler's Religion, so you can see these photographs there if you get the book. But then what happened was, a few years later, after Hitler was already in power, they airbrushed that cross out of the photo and changed the caption. And the point here is that Hitler was trying to distance himself from Christianity at that point, although while he was trying to come to power, he was trying to play like he was, in sync with Christianity and had its approval. But then they airbrushed the cross out, and they also changed the caption. The new caption says, Hitler after sightseeing at the historic Maria Church in Bremerhaven. So making clear that he just went to see the architecture. He wasn't really going to a church service.
Right. So he would change as needed based upon his own sort of political desires, how much he would try to either, again, going to that point of co-option or destruction of the church, trying to appear like he was also a man of God to some people for a while, and then, of course, pushing further away from that. I want to ask you, Richard, before we let you go, a lot of rhetoric right now in the aftermath of the election and leading up to the election about sort of Hitlerian rhetoric. A lot of people talking about how they're afraid of a rise of fascism. As somebody who has been diving deep into just how terrifying and frightening Hitler's mindset really was and what he did, what do you make of this sort of thing? I mean, I always feel like the moment somebody starts to invoke Hitler comparisons, one, they are always wrong, because there's always one Hitler, and that level of evil is almost impossible to reach any sort of equivalent. But also it feels to me like it's become a go-to for the intellectually lazy. Oh, this person is like Hitler.
Yeah, I can understand on the one hand some of the ways that people construe this, but actually I see it sort of in the opposite vein. One of the things that I see most objectionable about Hitler and what he did was that he basically wrote off certain elements of the human race and defined them as being non-humans or subhumans, and therefore justified the killing of them. And so the killing of Jews, the killing of gypsies, the killing of people with disabilities, this was all justified on the basis of, these people are not really up to snuff. We're the superior ones, they're the inferior ones. And interestingly, I see it sort of on the other party side, where it's mainly the Democrats who are trying to define certain humans as non-persons, such as those that are unborn, and with assisted suicide becoming more and more prevalent in our society too, those that are nearing the end of their life and those with disabilities. And so it seems to me that if we want to make comparisons with what was going on with the Hitler regime, we ought to make comparisons with people who are trying to define certain humans as being non-human.
Yeah, compare actual death and the elevation of death to other deaths, as it seems to be.
I mean, if you think about it,
Go ahead.
If you think about it, Trump is talking about deporting people who are illegal aliens. On the Democratic side of tickets are talking about killing millions of unborn children and allowing assisted suicide and other kinds of things that are resulting in actual death. So which of these is worse?
Richard, thank you very much for joining us. We got to leave it there. We're going to go into a break. But Richard Weikart is the author of Hitler's Religion. It is available now. You can check it out on Amazon or bookstores near you. Richard, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Buck Sexton in for Glenn. Back right after this break. Sexton here in for Glenn. Fascinating story, and I don't have too much time to go into it, but I want to give you the broad strokes. You can go check it out yourself. It's from the Wall Street Journal. The title is Venezuela's Nemesis is a hardware salesman at a Home Depot in Alabama. Now, as you may already know, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, yet it has this revolutionary socialist government that has done such a horrific job. It's so autocratic and done such a bad job of managing the economy that they've all the things you expect. They're running out of toilet paper. They don't have the shelves are bare in the stores. They have rationing, big black market, lots of crime, all kinds of problems. This is what happens as a result of statism and state control of all economic activity. So you've got this individual, Gustavo Diaz, who works at Home Depot, and he has a website that tells people that tracks the actual black market exchange rate of the bolivar, which is the currency in Venezuela. And so this is how people know what things in Venezuela cost. And so you've got this revolutionary government that is in complete free fall. It's one of the examples that people point to now of how badly things can go. You've got Nicolas Maduro accusing this one individual, again, guys at a Home Depot just doing his thing, runs a website. The president of Venezuela says that he's waging economic war. So this is a guy with a website who, when he's not stocking shelves at Home Depot, doing what he does, getting a paycheck, taking care of his family, runs this website that sets the prices for things on the black market in Venezuela, which completely upends or makes much more difficult Venezuela's government's control of this market or efforts to control this market, because this is how people are actually buying things. It undermines this revolutionary government. It's just a fascinating story. I really recommend you go check it out. And I want to bring it up to you because don't think for 1 second that one person can make a huge difference. This is just a guy with a website, and he is now public enemy #1 to Venezuela, which I'm sure he should be and is very proud of, because that government needs to go. That's going to be it for me today here on the Glenn Beck program.